Right, so obviously I was gone for a while. I missed the month of March, and so I couldn't watch the Sharks and missed watching 12 games. And so let's go over games 56 through 67 and, just talk about how the month of March really went for the Sharks. Yeah, so the record over that 12 game span was 5-5-2, which honestly exceeded my expectations. The Sharks, right when I left, they were not playing good at all. They had just lost 8-0 to Nashville. And, they're still very much playing poorly when it comes to, where they are on the standings and overall. But 5-5-2, like I said, it did exceed my expectations. And there was a couple good games in this stretch. The Sharks, they lost on March 6th in overtime to the Ducks. That was the first game I missed. And it was a really close game, but, the Ducks got that overtime winner. And Zachary Sawchenko was in net, and he had a really good game. I've been really impressed with Sawchenko. His progression, being with the Barracuda, and of course the Sharks got rid of Melnichuk, and I think that I'd had to boost his confidence somehow. And so, that was an interesting game for the Sharks. They did pick up the point, and they played the Anaheim Ducks, that division foe. But, that was the second time in not too long of a span that the Sharks lost to the Ducks in overtime. But the Sharks, the following game, and actually the following two games, beat the LA Kings. They first beat them in overtime 4-3. That was a good game. And Zachary Sawchenko, once again, in net, and he played good. It really gets you excited when you have a young player like that. I believe he's in his 20s, and, he gets an overtime loss, which, ultimately wasn't really his fault, and then an overtime win. The Sharks then beat the Kings again, 5-0. And this was a really good game for the Sharks. Tomas Hertl with 2 goals, Timo Meier with a goal. Adin Hill was in net. He was flawless, 29 of 29, and the Sharks got the clean victory over the LA Kings. And at this point, you had to be thinking they're playing really good. And over the stretch, obviously they're not going to make the playoffs, but it's at least good to have some hope for next season and see what players are progressing well. Now, the Sharks lost in a close one once again, in overtime again, to the Panthers, a team that's very much a good, very good franchise right now. James Reimer was in net, so the Sharks mixing it up at goalie. This is 4 different games with 3 different goalies. Reimer was 31 of 34, but the Sharks did lose to the Panthers, and Logan Couture had a goal. Milosh had a goal, which was good to see, but they just couldn't get it done against Florida. But in the next one, they would play the LA Kings and lose. So they beat the Kings twice, and then they lost to them. They lost 3-0 to LA. They had Reimer in net. He did okay, but they did get shut out, and Cal Peterson was flawless in net for the LA Kings. In the next one, they lost to the Avalanche 5-3 in a pretty good game overall. But, of course, not a win. I do think Sawchenko did his best. You're playing an Avalanche team that is very much filled with stars. Cale Makar had a goal, and the Sharks, they tried their best, but they didn't win this one. So, yeah, they've lost 5-3 to the Colorado Avalanche, but following that, they beat the Arizona Coyotes by a final score of 4-2. And this was a good game as well, where they had James Reimer in net. So Reimer, he played pretty good in this stretch. And they beat him 4-2. And they had a goal from Noah Gregor. That was great to see. Rudolph Balcers and Nick Bonino. And, they played great. I think although the Sharks practically eliminated at this point from the playoffs, very close to being at least, I think there are things you can take away and say, okay, that's a good bright spot. And I think, seeing Reimer play good like that and then seeing these goals, it's good. And although these aren't against the greatest teams, some of these wins, you still have to be happy about it. The Sharks had a road trip up in Alberta, first playing the Flames and beat them 4-3. And that was a good game as well. James Reimer, he was great in net, 28 of 31. And Barabanov had a goal, as well as Couture and Meier and Vlasic. And the Sharks got the victory over the Flames. However, playing the other Alberta team, the Edmonton Oilers, the Sharks lost 5-2. And that was a pretty bad game. Kaapo Kähkönen was in net for the Sharks. Obviously, they acquired him from Minnesota. And he didn't do horrible. He was 36 of 40. But I think, I had higher expectations for his debut. And Mike Smith was great in net for the Oilers, and they got the victory over the Sharks. So yeah, moving on, only 3 games left out of this 12-game stretch. The Sharks got revenge over the Ducks and beat them 4-1 in San Jose. In this one, James Reimer was in net. Once again, a good performance. He was 27 of 28, just allowing that one goal. Timo Meier had a hat trick, which was awesome, and Vlasic had the 4th goal. And so that was great to see, and the Sharks got the victory. Now, the Sharks lost to one of the worst teams in the league, the Arizona Coyotes, in the following game by a final score of 5-2, and James Reimer was in net, and I think, honestly, he probably got overworked because, you know, that's something that happens to Reimer when he has to play back-to-back. He gets overwhelmed. Brent Burns did have a goal, though, and Scott Reedy as well. So 2 guys that aren't super much, like, they aren't really big goal scorers right now, get goals, but, you know, the Sharks did lose, so that was bad. And then the final game of the stretch was a 4-2 loss against the Colorado Avalanche. It was a good game overall. At the beginning, they tied it up, and the Sharks had Kaapo Kähkönen in net. He had to save a lot of shots. He was 42 of 46. Not bad. I mean, .913 save percentage, but you're playing the Avalanche. They're going to have a lot of good players, you know, just put pressure. And so the Sharks lost. But, I mean, you know, the stretch, like I said, it did exceed my expectations. And, yeah, so basically, to recap this stretch, the Sharks played 12 games in the games I missed watching. And overall, they're 5-5-2. And so that's 12 points they picked up. Not horrible. And, you know, they're going to just build off of this into next year, I think. You know, obviously they're not going to make the playoffs, but, you know, that's just what you have to do. So there's still, you know, a decent amount of games left, just about, I believe, like 14. So we'll see what happens in that stretch. But, yeah, anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts. I'll see you guys later. Yeah, go Sharks.